the strange... No, stop. I don't care about the JNS article, chatter. Please stop spamming it. I don't want to read the 750,000th fucking article about like, oh, as a Jewish person, I was really scared that Hasan Piker spoke at the College Democrats of America, okay? For the last 3 years of Israel's genocide, that's all we've written. That's all we've read here on the broadcast. Okay, please. I don't know why you want to fucking pull me back into that. We're done with that. Okay, we're moving on. We're moving on to a different line of attack coming from the State Department. So the State Department released a new report this morning. This comes after the political terrorism event. Okay. Ken Klippenstein was the one who informed me this morning. But here is a highlight. Here is a headline. U.S. accuses Cuba of long-term ideological warfare and infiltration at the highest levels of the American government. Okay. The New Republic wrote about it too. State Department targets Hasan Piker, Ilhan Omar's daughter, and DSA. A new State Department report on Cuba goes after American citizens on the left. Now, this is a gross violation of the First Amendment. There's no other way to read it. It is a direct attack on American citizens exercising their freedom of speech, their freedom of expression. Ken Klippenstein reported on it this morning as well. I said, why is the State Department naming American citizens in their Cuba report where they seemingly complain about our opinions on U.S. sanctions policy? This is absolutely protected by the First Amendment. They are trying to chill speech through intimidation. This is a not so subtle way of bringing McCarthyism back to the United States of America. And the targets are, ironically enough, also identical. Okay? Because there is no domestic terrorism statute, as it would be directly at odds with the First Amendment, the State Department is utilizing the broad powers that it has in the post-9/11 global war on terror universe. They're using the tools that they have at their disposal that they've deployed over and over again by claiming that the people that are socialists, that criticize the Trump administration, are actually a part of an international network of terrorism. Because they cannot do this, line of attack at the domestic level, they are trying to tackle it from the international level. Okay? They have a lot more tools at their disposal to, quote unquote, tackle international networks of terror. You claim someone is a terrorist, you claim that they're being funded by foreign entities, and then boom, you can do whatever the fuck you want. Deny them their habeas corpus, torture them in Guantanamo Bay. This is the process that the American government has deployed. This report that Marco Rubio released, that he said, for more than 6 decades, the Cuban regime has been leading sponsor of radical leftism and third worldism in the United States. The State Department is exposing the full history of Cuban espionage and subversion in our country. The American people deserve to know. Joe Roth says, this report is a justification for the military invasion of Cuba and the new COINTELPRO. Rubio lists the People's Forum, Code Pink, and DSA as Cuban front groups, which the Trump administration will inevitably try to break and suppress. That is precisely what they're doing. Matt Petty has an opinion on this as well. He says, that's exactly it. The Rubio camp does not have a problem with communism as an economic system or an idea. They believe that the lesser races, civilizations of the world have gotten too uppity, and Tin Pot socialist states are the easiest to make an example of. When you point out that Islamo-leftism or third worldism is incoherent, that's the point. They're telling you to fear everyone else in the world, and it's all one horde trying to take what's yours, no matter what justification. This is why I was very frustrated. Yeah, the report is so insane that it actually states, in all seriousness, that Cuba's main goal is to conquer the United States. It's about as dumb gets. Don't be fooled. This is the State Department trying to build a foundational case for U.S. military action should Trump decide to do it. These various threads can only be understood through the prism of the Cuban regime's ideological foundation, imbued by its founder with a singular goal of conquering the neighboring United States. Since 1959, Cuba has been, and without fundamental radical reforms, will always be less a nation state than all-encompassing intelligence and subversion operation focused around its existential revolution against the United States. Amid all this, the Cuban people themselves continue to suffer in hunger and darkness, forced to live in something akin to modern slavery under the occupying regime held hostage by their own state. The report also is extremely clueless on the big reason why Cuba is still offering its services to the extent it has any to Russia and China, because it views doing so as good balancing behavior against a neighboring adversary with infinitely more power than itself. A Cuban plot to undermine McDonald's, the ultimate example of American imperialism. Yeah. The threat posed by Cuba is described in far more dire terms than those employed by the U.S. intelligence officials and State Department diplomats over several decades, reviving speculation that the Trump administration is establishing a pretext for overthrowing the communist government in Havana, a longtime goal of Secretary of State Marco Rubio. That is precisely what's going on. But the icing on the cake isn't just to create a fake sufficient reason to militarily invade Cuba, a country that we have been starving for 60 years and only have enacted more cruelty in the last decade. Okay? But besides that, this is an opportunity to basically create a legal structure to claim that domestic socialist movements, domestic left movements, are actually a part of this international apparatus of left terror. This is why I was very frustrated and very worried when I saw the counterterrorism seminar that they delivered this past weekend. I talked about it, I warned about it, and this is complementary to exactly what they're trying to establish. Okay? This is part of the reason why I brought up Fergie Chambers' arrest in Spain, directing the Spanish government to extradite Fergie Chambers, an American citizen with a profound amount of wealth, a centimillionaire, an inheritor of the Cox dynasty and the wealth, who funds certain protest movements and pro-Palestinian movements all around the globe, as a terrorist. Okay? They're trying to go after Fergie Chambers. They're trying to go after Roy Singham. Okay? Roy Singham lives in China. Fergie Chambers, I don't know where he lives, but I guess he was in Tunisia or something. And they are using the Spanish government. They use the Spanish government to intercept him at the point of travel and arrest him. And now they're demanding that Fergie Chambers get extradited to the United States of America so he can be prosecuted in the United States of America. Southern District of New York is actually playing a role in the RICO case against Roy Singham. Now, neither of these people are people in my sphere of influence or in my orbit in any way, shape, or form. I just know of them. Fergie has actually criticized a lot of the stuff that I do. I'm too reformist for him, whatever. I think it's still a clear-cut example of fascism to try to actively suppress, punish, and claim that all people that go against American foreign policy, American citizens that go against American foreign policy, are all actually terrorists. Okay? That's what they're doing. Centimillionaire says your reformist is funny. I mean, he is more radical than I am. Let's be real. So, 99-page State Department report on Cuba is drawing accusations of McCarthyism from peace groups and civil liberties advocates for naming private American citizens, including a member of Congress's daughter, over their opposition to U.S. policy. The report, titled Cuba, Capital of 21st Century Communism, casts the island as decades-long covert threats that has infiltrated the highest reaches of the U.S. government and cultivated generations of American activists. In a section on the revolutionary tourism, it named streamer Hasan Piker, Amazon labor union founder Christian Smalls, the Democratic Socialists of America, former UK labor leader Jeremy Corbyn, and Isra Hersey, a campus activist and the daughter of Representative Ilhan Omar, over their participation in a March 2026 aid convoy to Cuba. It goes on to note that Hersey was suspended from Barnard in 2024 for organizing Gaza solidarity encampments. Why is the State Department naming American citizens in their Cuba report, where they seemingly complain about our opinions on U.S. sanctions policy? Piker wrote. This is absolutely protected by the First Amendment. They are trying to chill speech through intimidation. Medea Benjamin of Code Pink whose group is also named, called the report McCarthyism, plain and simple. She told DropSite that Code Pink is now under Treasury Department investigation for bringing medical supplies to Cuban children's hospitals. The people delivering medicine are under investigation, not the officials enforcing policies that deprive Cubans of medicine, food, fuel, and electricity, she said. One of the things that I have been very frustrated by is that this is, they've been signaling that they're going to do this for the longest time. And a lot of fucking liberals have been celebrating this, thinking, oh, they're packing up our opposition in the Democratic Party. They're going to take care of all the fucking nasty little communists that we hate too. They don't realize that this is inevitably going to impact them as well. This is just the starting point. The real reason why they're doing this is because they want to eradicate the First Amendment. And if liberals actually play ball with this, if they appease the fascist monsters, they too will be in the same fucking concentration camps that we get sent to first. A good time to remind people that McCarthyism really just targeted subversives within the government, which resulted in numerous government workers being fired on suspicion of being gay. This was known as the Lavender Scare, and we're seeing this already with the vilification of trans people. Yes. It said the blockade that the report exists to justify has left Cuba with shortages of medicine, a healthcare system starved of supplies, and a collapsing power grid. Cuba poses no threat to the American people, the group said. The report makes no mention of the U.S. energy embargo imposed in January, which the group has noted caused nationwide blackouts and devastating collective punishment across the island. This month, 136 countries at the UN voted to condemn the suffocating economic sanctions on Cuba, with the U.S. and Israel among the handful opposed. Yeah. First, they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. History doesn't often repeat, but it rhymes, is what they say, right? It's a cliche. Well, right now, history isn't even rhyming. It's just repeating. This is a justification for McCarthyism. And because they can't do that off domestic policies, because there's no domestic anti-terrorism statute in this country, they're doing it by creating a sufficient legal environment with the vague international terrorism statute that exists post-global war on terror. And they will trap regular dissidents, liberals as well. A new State Department report on Cuba's campaign of subversion against the United States, a virtual government blacklist against left-wing Americans and groups linked to last week's Rubio-led summit on political terrorism. The report is unusually candid about the government's targets. Many of the most significant upheavals in recent American political history, from the George Floyd riots to the rise of Antifa to the explosion of pro-terrorist activism on American college campuses, can be linked in some way, shape, or form to Cuban influence, the report says. So remember when Donald Trump was like, China is the reason why the election was stolen and China is the reason why everybody hates me? Marco Rubio's doing the same, but this time he's saying Cuba is the reason for why Black Lives Matter as a protest movement grew in this country. It is the highest level of delusion. Everyone with a fucking working brain cell understands that this is an abject lie, but it doesn't really matter. They're spitting on our face and telling us it's raining. As for those who these supposed agents of Cuban influence are, the report is remarkably explicit. It names people like Ben Cohen of Ben & Jerry's ice cream fame, mayors Zohran Mamdani and Karen Bass, media figures like Amy Goodman and Hasan Piker, organizations like the Democratic Socialists of America and the Amazon Labor Union. The implication is clear. Secretary of State Marco Rubio thinks there should be a modern-day blacklist of the political left in America. In fact, the report explicitly mentions the blacklist, McCarthy-era investigations and prosecutions of the 1950s and their effectiveness at dismembering the Communist Party USA. The 100-page report titled Cuba, the capital of 21st century communism, was released this morning. An entire section of the report, numbering over 3 pages long, is dedicated to the Democratic Socialists of America. The Democratic Socialists of America serves as a particularly potent illustration of the ideological victory of Cuba's efforts to position itself as the spiritual capital of third worldist radicalism, the report says. This represents a significant advantage for the Cuban influence operation. Havana no longer needs to rely solely on intelligence penetration or asset cultivation to exert influence over the United States. Though the report concedes that DSA was not shaped by the direct and tangible influence of the Cuban government and that it has organic ideological commitments, it insists that none of that is to say the group has no ties to the Cuban regime and its influence network. Instead, the report points out the group's delegations to Cuba as evidence of Cuban influence. For more than 6 decades, the Cuban regime has been leading sponsors of radical leftism and third worldism in the United States. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said in a post on Twitter linking to the report. Whatever you think of DSA, it is hardly fringe. It claims as members prominent politicians like New York Mayor Zohran Mamdani, and it has helped to nominate dozens of politicians like him in the office in recent years. Senator Bernie Sanders identifies as a democratic socialist, having himself popularized the term, as do Representatives Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib, who are card-carrying members, as well as Mamdani. The Cuba report follows last week's Rubio-led International Summit to Political Terrorism. That summit, as I reported, introduced the new term far-left terrorism, abbreviated FLT, a term it never really defined, which, by the way, it's not supposed to. The vagueness is a part of the process, okay? That's why it's perfect. It's vague. You can slap it on anything you want to, from old folks that are sitting at, No Kings rallies to people who say Orange Man is a Cheeto in the dang White House, all the way to, more radical parts of the protest movement against Donald Trump. The vagueness is a feature, not a bug. Exactly. Speaking at the summit, Rubio vowed that further new terrorist designations for left-wing groups would be coming soon. Jeremy Lewin, the Undersecretary of State for Foreign Assistance, linked last week's political terrorism summit to today's Cuba report, saying on X, for 7 decades, the Cuban regime has been behind both the ideological underpinnings of third worldism and subversive organizing structures of the new radical left political terrorists that Secretary Rubio called out with clarity last week. But virtually all the summit could do is substantiate the supposed scourge of political terrorism was to focus on groups that are almost comically dated, like the 70s era Symbionese Liberation Army or the Weather Underground. The summit was vague about what are the equivalent groups today. Today's Cuba report, however, names names in an obvious attempt to stigmatize American citizens who are very much politically active today. In some cases, there are even sitting politicians, from Congresswoman Maxine Waters to Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass. I read the 100-page report and counted references to at least 43 contemporary American groups and individuals, which the report identifies as follows. Suzanne Attlee, the president of the National Lawyers Guild, who participated in the Nuestra America convoy and who, the report notes, praised Venezuela's 2024 elections. The Amazon Labor Union, Antifa, Asada's Daughters, a Chicago-based Black Lives Matter abolitionist offshoot that trains young activists in the radical spirit of Assata Shakur. Association for Investment in Popular Action Committees, APAC, a California-based umbrella nonprofit that funds left-wing media and delegations to Cuba and Venezuela. Karen Bass, current mayor of Los Angeles and former congresswoman who was a Venceremos brigade organizer in the 1970s. This is real. I used to talk about Karen Bass's radical politics back in the day. Hasan, if you weren't CIA, I bet you'd be shaking in your boots right now. Yeah, no, this obviously, once again, to all of my naysayers on the more radical elements of the left, this once again proves that I am obviously a federal agent. This is how it works. Medea Benjamin, Black Alliance for Peace, Black Lives Matter, Chesa Boudin, the former district attorney of San Francisco, Changing Frequencies, Claudia Jones School, the Washington, D.C.-based organizing collective that conducts popular education and pro-Cuba lobbying, Code Pink, Women for Peace, Ben Cohen, Claudia de la Cruz, the co-founder of the People's Forum, IFCO executive director and 2024 presidential candidate for the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Obviously, PSL is being determined as a front group for Roy Singham. That's like the big RICO case that they have developed right now. And even if you have your disagreements with the PSL, even if you have your disagreements with the People's Forum, understand that this is not going to stop there. And you're a fucking idiot if you think that this is just about radical communists, okay? The main politics sub is defending you again on topic. Look at that. State Department targets Hasan Piker and Ilhan Omar's daughter to DSA. What a massive waste of resources and time. For the American people, yes. For the American ruling class, however, this is and always been a top priority. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad that like Redditors are actually beginning to recognize that the sincerity and the severity of the crisis at hand, you know? I mean, it's such a fucking ridiculous take to claim that Cuba, a country of 9 million that is 90 miles off of our coastline, that we have actively starved for the last 60 years and only gotten worse in our starvation policies in the last fucking 10, is capable of invading ideologically, militarily, doing anything to the United States of America. It's not only impossible to believe, but it's also, there's no evidence for it whatsoever. I'm going to say something that is going to anger my fellow Republicans about Mamdani. I listened to his interview with Lulu Navarro. For a low information voter who has no time to pay attention to the substance of his message, what he's saying is absolutely brilliant in his attacks against the right. The tone of what he's saying is brilliant. It's part folksy everyman. Republicans have abandoned the working class or a bunch of elites without being harsh or conspiratorial. He has gotten very strong, very fast, and is evolving his national messaging to the rest of the country. Despite my abject fear and repulsion of socialism, it is really impactful. If Democrats are really smart, they will nominate someone with his tenure and tone on economics and national policy, leaving out Israel and international politics, which is a whole other ball of wax. If Democrats do this in 28, we have a huge fucking problem. A huge fucking problem we will not be able to podcast bro our way out of.